it's such a travesty to prevent the user from learning. It's because you very paternalistically think that the user is incapable of doing so, right? Like, it's not my job to say the user is dumb. The user is not dumb. They already buying Bitcoin, right? Like, they are just not technically literate yet, but we can get them there too, right? Like, so expose them to the stuff.
Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Changing the Tide. Stoked to have NVK on today of Coinkite. He's the CEO and co-founder there. With Bitcoin on Lightning being a gravitational force that's growing in mass and leading to greater freedom and prosperity worldwide, it totally wouldn't be right to not have NVK on here, because Bitcoin is a freedom tool. And what NVK and the team over at Coinkite are doing is creating freedom-generating devices that help you securely store and transport your Bitcoin, and doing it true to the principles of what Bitcoin is. When new BIPs come out, they're gamifying how it's done, how you, even down to BIP 39, and creating your own entropy via dice rolls. On the OPENDIME, using a file to generate the right amount of randomness by just dragging that into the file folder on OPENDIME so that it creates the private key, which still stays hidden to either the giver or receiver. And so these sorts of things and a whole lot more are what NVK and his team are up to over there. And so I'm excited for you to dive in and check it out. Here we go. NVK, welcome to the show.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I thought it was not appropriate to have a podcast called Changing the Tide about bringing greater freedom and prosperity to the world without bringing you on, NVK.
We're just doing our part.
Yeah, you had an awesome tweet the other day about how many high net worth individuals now in this age with Bitcoin are able to just take advantage of jurisdictional arbitrage, and I asked how many will be taking their OPENDIMEs and COLDCARDs with them.
I think a good chunk of them will pack and go. It's amazing, isn't it, that now we're sort of like truly free to just move on, right? And hopefully they will apply pressure on the original jurisdictions to fix themselves too.
I'm really hoping that's the case in the USA and they don't pass this awful bill, the infrastructure bill.
Right. I have very little doubt that they will pass it. I mean, these guys are running on re-election cycles, right? They couldn't give less of a shit about the future.
Good point. The future is their next 2 years or 4 years in office, right?
That's right.
So, well, awesome. Hey, I wanted to dive into just your story on Bitcoin. You also had another tweet about, I remember 10 years ago, seeing Bitcoin for the first time and thinking, wow, this is what it is and it actually works, and just being blown away by that. Could you take us through that experience?
I mean, it's kind of funny, but it was very uneventful because, in those days, I mean, like we had like, this is totally like some esoteric thing that, unless you were crazy, you pretty much assume it's not going to work. And then, but the more you sort of like learn about it and the more you reflect about it, you go like, holy shit, like, if this thing actually works, it's going to be very interesting, right? And I think I made the same mistake that a lot of people made in those days, which is, think that Bitcoin is sort of like more of a medium of exchange than a store of value. I was absolutely ignorant about Austrian economics. And I think that like many people, especially the people who were technically minded, technically capable, were also extremely ignorant about the economics of it. there were very few people who were like just very good at understanding both. But I think like most people saw it as like this is a freedom tool, right? This is definitely something that removes the choke points from society in regards to money. I think that was very obvious. You know, and because there was not a lot of like education or writings about it, right? It's like there's this new thing. We're all sort of trying to push it through different holes in terms of understanding and sort of try to come up with like, what the hell is this, right? And then, I mean, for me, the main sort of like aha moment was like, you know, when I made my first transaction, that like, what do you mean? Like the value is sort of stored by my computer and is being sent to somebody else without an intermediary, right? Like for digital money, that never existed, right? Like, you know, the things that were happening before were like e-gold, or like Liberty Reserve, right? That everybody went to jail. Like,
Yeah.
you know, like everybody was a little bit on edge, right? Like, you know, am I building a business on top of something that might land me in jail? I'm not doing anything illegal. I just want to play with this technology, right? and it, like, to me, it was a serious sort of like fear. It's like, okay, like, you know, we want to work on this stuff. This is really cool. But it's really unclear if there is actual like consequences to this, because it was so tiny. Nobody would give a shit if like government comes and puts all of us in jail, right? So there was this mix, right? Like of like, this is so powerful, we don't know what the fuck this is, and like there could be consequences, right? So much so that like for the first like many years of us being business, I had zero like Twitter presence. I had a Twitter account that I probably was tweeting pictures of like restaurants or something. You know what I mean? Like it was absolutely nothing. I didn't even used to post on Bitcoin Talk. I finally created an account later on, as have been like 2013 or something, to just post the projects that we were working on. Like, I wasn't like immersed in that world, like in a personal level, right? Like, we were like hard working on like cool stuff for it, but like, you know, there wasn't this sort of like happy vibe of like, you know, everybody sort of like on Twitter just doing shit posts about like all-time high, right? That was not the sentiment. So yeah, it was definitely a very different space.
Yeah. Because that was like 2011, I'm guessing, then, when you found Bitcoin for the first time?
I found it, must have been 2010 with the Slashdot article. That's when I first bumped into it. I think it was Doc Hacks who sent it to me.
Okay.
The link to that paper, and you know, you read it and you go like, there's no fucking way this is gonna work, right? Like,
surprise!
Really? Ta-da! Right? Like, no, you couldn't even like buy Bitcoin. Like, you know, you had to like go on IRC and like meet a guy on Starbucks with cash. Like that was, you know, how there wasn't even pricing. Like, you know, it was not like, you know, the way people think of it now. Like, you know, like it's obvious. You buy, you hold it, and you know, like it was something different. Yeah,
way different world. Well before I got in, so much to my chagrin. But
it's yeah.
But we're still early days. I think, crazy enough. So.
For sure. I mean, you know, there is maybe like 100 million people who own Bitcoin, maybe 200 million people. Well, there is another 8 billion people that are gonna need to come, right? Like, it's so early, so early.
So early. Well, so then you obviously saw this Bitcoin thing, found out actually it is going to work, and you started building Coinkite.
Yeah, so we weren't sure if it was going to work. Still, like, I mean, really, like, no, absolutely no idea. But the main thing was like, okay, so this is like cool technology, right? We're technologists. We want to build stuff. We are not finance people. We do not want to build a finance company. So the first thing we do, like, okay, well, let's make some server that does something for Bitcoin, and like, let's learn how it works, right? So we built what was called a btclook.com. Was essentially a blockchain explorer for Bitcoin. In those days, there was only blockchain.com. Blockexplorer.com.
Okay.
It was like no CSS, just like, the blocks are there, and here's the information, right? So we wanted to make one that like was like pretty, and it was using the blockchain at that time was really small. I think it was less than 10 gigabytes, right?
Wow.
So we just put it all in RAM. So it was like running in RAM, and you could transverse the blockchain with these cool bubbles and things. And we're like, okay, so like building an explorer really teaches you how Bitcoin works, right? Because you're trying to like really transverse it. And then after that, sort of like, okay, so this is cool. People are gonna use this for payments. So then the next sort of step is like, well, let's make payment solutions. But people like debit cards. So we're like, okay, great. So we started sort of doing research, and we figured out, hey, we can build our own sort of Bitcoin debit machine. It can be a point of sale. It can do all the exchange services, so that people at the location just type in how much cash they're exchanging, and it calculates for them the exchange rate, so they can buy and sell Bitcoin in person. And then they have this debit card for them to authenticate. And then if the client comes and they're using our debit card, that they can do intra-account exchange, like intra-account transactions, right?
Yeah.
Without confirmation concerns, because even though it was a real Bitcoin transaction, we would secure that one user was sending to the other, and we wouldn't let them try to double spend or anything. So then we built that.
Did that require like a user account, or was that just like you literally buy the prepaid debit? And
it was both. You could do both.
Okay.
You could have an account with us, or you could not, because we would just give you a QR code to deposit if you had a phone.
Yeah.
So it was both, and then we sort of like, okay, well, let's be a crypto bank, right? Like, and this was before crypto meant cryptocurrency, right? It was like cryptography bank.
Mm-hmm.
So we essentially, when you created a Coinkite account, we would generate for you a savings account and a checking account. So you log in, it looked exactly like online banking. And you could get your debit card if you wanted, and you could connect the account with exchanges. And then a couple years later, I think, was when the first hardware wallet came about. You could use it with the system. And then we sort of put in multi-sig on all that, so you could use it. And then there was APIs. It was all available over Tor. It was kind of cool. I mean, like, we got to a point, I think, the peak of it, we probably had like about $4 billion worth of Bitcoin in it.
Whoa.
And it was becoming a nightmare to maintain. Like, it made enough money to maintain itself, but it wasn't like a hugely profitable business. So, and the headaches of like handling a ton of BTC for people, even though a lot of it was not fully custodial, sort of like decided to shut it off. And focus on what we like to do, which is like just the hardware. We don't want to offer the service.
Yeah. Especially if you're starting to run a bank, then you get people get in or you get in people's crosshairs. The financial powers that be.
It's not surprisingly so. Regulators, every time we talk to people who are in that space, sort of say like, you guys are not doing anything that's not allowed. Although I think with the new regulations now, we would probably have sort of like tripped something that we would have to like either become a money business or whatever. But in those days, we were 100% kosher. We made sure to have on retainer a very big law firm. like I did not want to deal with like legal issues because we were not a non, right? Like we were like real people in a real place, and those were concerns.
Yeah. So you wonder like, oh man, is this in the early days? Is this like legal? People are ending up in jail.
Yeah, I mean, Shrem got in trouble, right? I mean, there was a lot of like, but he was buying and selling. We weren't, right? We were just sort of like providing the technology for people to buy and sell themselves, kind of thing, and that was the goal. Never to become a finance business.
Yeah. This is probably a good time before we go forward and talk more about like COLDCARD, OPENDIME, and all those awesome devices. Maybe to go back, you mentioned you're a technologist. So like, as you're growing up, was technology just something you were like obsessed with, working with all the time? What was that like, for you growing up?
I never did schooling for technology, right? Like the technology part is self-taught. I actually was into arts, like was always sort of like hacking away things, and I was into the radio stuff and early internet things. Trying to steal the neighbor's line to use DSL in Brazil, that kind of stuff. And back in those days, the cell phones weren't digital and it wasn't encrypted, so you could, hack them up to try to listen to other channels and, that kind of stupid stuff. It was fun. And but I was very fortunate that this was before Bitcoin. Doc Hex and I started like a company to sort of like are coming up with ideas and create applications. And he's a bit older than I am, and he's a beast, right, with technology. Like that's really like how we managed to get a lot of the stuff that we do done. It's I like to say it's like I'm the shitty coder, and like we put things together, but he really drives them home. And then we started sort of making things. We would have our little brainstorm sessions, come up with stuff, and sort of hack them out. That's sort of how the company came about.
That's really cool. So you mentioned Brazil. So is that where you grew up, like for your childhood?
Yeah. I came to Canada when I was about 19.
Okay. Oh, okay. So it was like you were pretty much past the childhood and adolescence phase. You were in.
Yeah, that's right. I am. I was formed as a young adult in Brazil, I guess. That's the short fuse comes from there.
So as far as Brazil, was there anything going on there that kind of caused you at that time to move?
I mean, Brazil is unfixable, right? And I did experience in my life inflation, like government seizing savings, like all those things affected me personally, right? Like,
wow.
So Bitcoin to me was very obvious, like in that sort of like non-capturable essence of it was just innate, right? It wasn't fully reflected yet, but it was definitely like there, like it was just so obvious. Because government did take our savings. Yay.
This reflects on, I think everyone was on Bitcoin Twitter was flipping out about the Mark Cuban thing a couple nights ago. And I only logged into that space for about maybe a minute just to hear. And it was amazing to hear Preston Pish go after him on the central bank thing, and for Mark Cuban to back up the central bank and say like, oh, you're just making it a boogeyman. And it's like, these people don't understand.
They don't. And I mean, I was fortunate that by the time I saw that was happening, I came in the last 5 minutes of it. Kind of feel like that was lucky. I think that the problem is like a lot of people didn't bother to read Satoshi's like first block, the Genesis block. It's right there, right? I mean, this is literally a fuck you to central banking, right? People in the early days were a bit confused about how that transpires, right? Like how does this happen? And it was not through the payment thing; it's through the store of value, right? And it's just it all becomes so obvious now, right? That like Bitcoin truly is a first principles sort of like solution to central banking, right? Every problem that we have with money, including capture at the transaction level, is due to central banking. Right? Because if they're not robbing you via inflation, they are robbing you by not letting you transact the way you want to transact with whoever you want to transact for whatever reason you want to transact, right? And sort of, it's like this things just feed on each other, and that's what it enables this whole thing to work. And I don't think a guy like Cuban understands this, right? I mean, he's a product of the .com. He's on the winning side of .com, right?
That's right.
I mean, guy's a one-hit wonder, right? I mean, like it's just like he made Real Player, good for him, smart, right? Like, but then that was it. Like he stopped thinking. Like he made a heap of money that deal, right? And it's unfortunate that he got lost in buying fancy cars, right? Like he stopped thinking, and you can see, right, when you hear him speaking about Bitcoin,
yeah,
you truly see how ignorant he is about the solution and the problem here. He may not agree. I mean, we don't have to agree. Like maybe you are a commie and you do want central banking to work. I mean, like,
well, he thinks it works. That's what's crazy is he's like, it's here to prevent people from being poor. Like,
I mean, listen, I can understand how a person thinks that way, right? Like we have generations now that's all we know. It is not easy to sort of like forget everything you know, to unplug yourself from the matrix here, right? Like, and there's also like, if you're a beneficiary of the Cantillionaire effect, like it really is hard for you to understand or want to understand it's all broken, right? So we are a product of our incentives, and he's clearly a product of somebody who benefited from the Cantillionaire effect for like 30 years.
Yeah. I think it's interesting to like see the difference between him and Saylor, because like didn't Cuban just basically like get rich off of URLs, like just buying URL names and domain names?
Yeah, so I think that's part of his business is understanding scarcity, right, with URLs. But I mean, I think the difference is like Saylor is a guy who makes a real product and sells to people. Right? Cuban made a product that was not really sold to people because it was mostly free, and he sold a company. He doesn't sell a thing that he makes.
Yeah,
it's a different thing. And so he's always been in the fiat equity sort of treadmill, it's a way of thinking, which is the traditional sort of Silicon Valley VC thing where essentially like I mean Ponzi in style. I don't have a problem with it. I actually think it's a fascinating, very efficient way of capitalizing a business, right? But it is what it is. It's like, you have people who come in at the ground floor, right? And they get a lion's share of the equity from the entrepreneur, right? Because the entrepreneur is poor and starved for cash. Then, it's not like they're trying to grow a business like a bank giving you credit, an interest rate. No, they're flipping those shares over and over and over and over. And the goal is IPO. The goal is not to build a fantastic product, a fantastic service. It's not none of that. The goal is to take it to IPO, right? Because it's not even that the IPO is going to capitalize the business for the business to do even more good or more interesting things. It's so that private equity can dump now the public equity, right? I mean, like, that's what it is, right? Like, we just have to be honest about it. And there's absolutely nothing wrong with it, like, technically speaking. Let's be honest, right? And that's where a guy like Cuban comes from, right? Like, he's in the very early days of that starting to be a thing in this scale.
Yeah, and just a huge beneficiary of that, and dumped it into, like we see with a lot of other things, dumped it into a sports team, and, due to inflation, that's just, inflated.
Yeah, it truly is. Like, it does not get more Cantillionaire, right? I mean, self-made Cantillionaire, which is good for him, right? Yeah. I mean, it's not like this guy sort of inherited some estate that, like, that has a patent portfolio. You know what I mean? And now he just milks it forever. I mean, like, the guy still wakes up in the morning and works, right? Like, he does stuff. Like, I'm not trying to beat a dead horse here, right? But, like, it's like, that's what you do. You flip shit.
Yep. Shark Tank.
Don't build things, right? Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, that's a good distinction. Sailor being a builder, product, service, Cuban being like a house flipper, which, that's the other Cantillionaire thing that's been going on the past couple decades.
It truly is, right? I mean, the flipping idea only works because of fiat inflation.
Right.
You wouldn't be able to flip stuff if there wasn't hyper asset inflation.
Yeah. I read Ron Paul's In the Fed. So I know you're Canadian, so, but in the U.S.
I read that. No, it's like Ron Paul is absolutely brilliant.
Yeah.
It's like the only guy who had balls and magical underwear to sort of like keep pushing forward and repeating the same shit over and over.
Yeah, and, I remember in that book specifically, he talked about how house flipping is such a scam because, there's no reason with you adding a few $1,000s of improvements that the house should go up by hundreds of thousands or even tens of thousands.
Yeah, it's this idea, right? Like it's not even the flipping because, Jesus, the renovations that people do these houses are like atrocious too, right? Because they essentially create a design that fits the most common denominator, right? Because they want to appeal to whoever. They all look like they have the douchey condo look, right? And it's all like the cheapest possible materials, right? Like, because again, it's not like a homeowner wants to like revamp that for him to live in, right? Like, no, this is just for appearance sake. It's like putting lipstick on a pig so that he can flip it because pigs are overinflated.
Yeah. Yeah. It's so true. Well, so going down that hole, or that rabbit hole, let's get back on. Let's talk about OPENDIME. And just what was the idea that, that inspired that?
So for many years, the only way you could sort of make a physical in-person transaction with Bitcoin was with a paper wallet, or you send the funds to the person and then you have to wait, like for 6 confirmations in front of you, right? Like it's like, okay, we're gonna sit here for an hour, right? Like and just wait. And it was always awkward conversation with like some interesting characters in person, and you're like, okay, well, this is not exactly how I want to spend an hour, right? And paper wallets are terrible, right? Because the person who creates them could redeem them back after giving it to you. So we spent a few years as just a side sort of lab thinking project, right? Like how can we make it so that 2 people can meet, check a thing, and then go about their ways, right? And again, right, depends on the trust model in regards to amounts and things. You would wait longer, you check more, or whatever. But ideally, it would be like, you're exchanging, like you want to buy a laptop or something of some value, but not your life savings, right? Or you want to gift Bitcoin to all the newcomers, right? Like without having to give them a paper wallet that they are going to probably lose it or screw up. So we were experimenting with metal, or like, can we generate a private key and then seal the metal and then like use laser to put a QR code on the outside, and all like trust minimize, and then we were thinking about like sort of like many different technologies. Then sort of like in display, right, of many different sort of iterations of this, like, why don't we just generate a private key that neither party knows? Right?
Yeah.
But we asked them to provide a piece of data so that we can prove that we used the generation of the key, and we don't know. That's always the problem, right? There is this trust issue where the factory generates the thing. Kind of like cautious coins. Those coins, I never got into them because I'm like, dude, this is just a retirement attack. Like, he was a super upstanding dude, but like, it's just not how I operate, right? So then we sort of like came up with this thing where you have to physically break it. And then when you break it, even if you solder it back, it doesn't matter, right? Like if it's broken and it's being powered up, it changes the state of the chip, right? Like it's not, the breaking is more symbolic than it is needed. We could have done that just digitally.
Yeah.
But yeah, so then now you have this device that has the lowest common denominator for UI, which is USB-A. We tried to make as cheap as we could, and you could sort of essentially stick it on a computer, even without being technically capable, without losing the trade-offs of the trust minimize sort of part of it. Initialize it, deposit, and just give it to somebody else.
So you took digital cash and turned it back into physical cash.
Right. I like people. It's like I want to be able to do commerce in person, right? Like going in person and haggling about products is like a great experience. I don't want us to lose that even after we have Bitcoin.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a really cool invention, and I think your art background comes out with it as well, because you've got the little like legal tender, and a bunch of different stamps on there, which comes through in your work, I think, quite a bit.
It's our products have some personality.
Well, in that personality, I saw someone kind of question your design aesthetic on Twitter the other day, and you're like, no, we like it like this.
So don't buy it.
Yeah. It's that like 80s, early 90s, just starting out in the computer kind of aesthetic is what I get. Is that what you were going for?
See, one of the coolest things about Bitcoin, that Bitcoin is transparent. It truly is. Like, you should never make a Bitcoin product that does not show some hash to people. Like, seriously, like, you're doing an absolute disservice to the technology if you're hiding everything, right, to the user. May lose some along the way. It's part of the deal. But those people weren't ready anyways, right?
Yeah.
Not everybody's ready for Bitcoin. And when you hide things from people, just to try to make it a bit easier or just less scary, because it is easy. I don't buy the not easy part.
Yeah.
But just the less scary because it doesn't have like hacks on things. You are increasing the trust threshold, right? Because now the user is trusting the UI. Somebody wrote, which will have bugs, which will cause people to lose money. Right? When you are showing the stuff to people, you lower that trust threshold. And all of our products are transparent. Okay? Like every single thing we make, you can see inside. There may be products in the future where that's just simply not possible due to the technology type. But the goal always is for us to show hacks somewhere. That's sort of like where the aesthetic sort of comes from.
Yeah. Even last night, to your point, I was loading up an OPENDIME, and you can check the block explorer. And you even gone to the links of saying, be careful if you click one of these and you're not on a VPN, like it could link this address with your IP address. And so just even putting the operational security in the UI shows, I think, the level of care for that you take.
Yeah, I mean, we give a shit, right? Like,
yeah,
I think that's part of the problem too. It's not the best sort of business strategy, but we do give a shit.
Yeah.
And I wish more companies did too, because sure, it's going to take longer to get people in, but then we're building something better.
Yeah, because there's been this haggling over what is like free and open source software and all of that, but then there's also the element of like, are you free and open on all of your interfaces and experiences?
Yeah, there's a lot of hypocrisy around stuff, mostly because it's not malicious. Well, there is some malicious aspect from a competition perspective where people want to frame things in a way so that it sandbags the other competitor, right? But aside from that, I think biggest issue is that a lot of people just don't even know how stuff works. So because a company is going to say, hey, we are free and open source, but then like which parts of the stack are free and open source, right? Like 90% of your stack is not free and open source. Like, so what you're telling me is that 10% of your final project in the hands of a user open source, right? Like it's bullshit. Like my goal is, it's not to feel good about this stuff. It's sort of like, okay, like what's like the honest take on this in regards to security, in regards to the trust. That's the part that I care, right? How people choose to license their stuff is none of my business. But like, can I provably, right? Self-verify the claims, the security claims a project does. Right? That's really pretty much all I really care.
Yeah, because those are the parts that are going to affect the sending and receiving and storing of this digital value.
I mean, you may not agree with like the licenses and things, but if you don't, it has one, nothing to do with security, and two, if you disagree, go build a competitor thing in the way you want, right? But the user is unharmed.
Yeah,
That's really the important part.
Yeah. Well, one thing I love NVK too about your guys' products, just from having used them, is the idea, and I think this is true of other companies. Like in the US, we have Fold, with this debit card that you can like get sats back and spin the wheel. You guys have gamified a lot of the Bitcoin experience, creating your own entropy, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, like, how do you explain entropy to like a user, right? Like, even a lot of Bitcoiners don't even know how this stuff works, right? So like, okay, great. Like, how could throw a picture into this drive, right? Like, and like now we got enough bytes we need that are unique, and then you have the dice thing on COLDCARD. It's like, okay, what's like an entropy generating device, right? That people have access to. Well, dice, right? So like, let's use dice. Some people made it with dominoes now, deck of cards. Generating entropy is not an easy proposition. Humans are terrible at it. We will generate a pattern. Doesn't matter how much we try. It's like, don't pick things at random because you will have a pattern. Human brain is designed to find patterns. So it's the opposite of entropy. So we figured, hey, like, let's add a little bit of personality to this, right? So there is some fun to doing the activity, which is, throwing dice for you to secure your funds.
And in the middle of it, you learn about BIP 39 and like all these other things.
Yeah, it's such a travesty to prevent the user from learning. It's because you very paternalistically think that the user is incapable of doing so, right? Like, it's like, it's not my job to say the user is dumb. The user is not dumb. They already buying Bitcoin, right? Like, they are just not technically literate yet, but we can get them there too, right? Like, so expose them to the stuff.
Yeah.
Remember, the majority of the people in the world will almost certainly be in custodial solutions. Those people are lost already. We can slowly peel them away from the custodial services when they are ready to leave. And if we are doing that, why not expose them a little further to actual knowledge that will prevent them from getting robbed, right? You look at the hard wallet space out there. I mean, like, the majority of those wallets are completely insecure. Majority of them are even fully closed source. And then you have sort of the major ones that are, better sets of trade-offs, right? So it's important to explain to users, like, what are you giving up to have this thing, right? Or that thing. And then you make a educated choice. And that's sort of the approach we take, because we're building a product for ourselves first, right? Like, we're Bitcoiners. We want to use the product with all the features that we could possibly come up with. And, we want simple and easy to use it for ourselves too. It's like, I don't want to spend an hour sending a transaction, right? Like, this is easy.
For sure.
It's just not stupid.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's so to talk about COLDCARD, did that come before OPENDIME? Version 1?
It's kind of funny, but the concept of it did. Then we sort of set it aside for a while because we were sort of then busy with OPENDIME, right? But then we sort of brought back that because we closed down our services and we needed a hard wallet ourselves. We were like, okay, like, bought all the stuff in the market and it's not for me. and it started as like, it was going to be just bare PCB, right? Like, no case, and it was going to be ultra cheap. And then there was a lot of people that wanted. So we figured, hey, you know what? If other people are going to use it, let's polish this a bit more, right? Like, let's put a case on it. Let's develop it a bit further. Security, in different directions as well, and sort of, I don't like bagware. So like, not going to be asking for donations. It's like, if I'm going to sell a thing, it needs to be profitable so that it's self-sustainable, and security comes from that too, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, there's money that goes into R&D, and sort of like it just self-fulfills as a thing that is supposed to survive the marketplace. The marketplace is the best place to test shit, right? If it's donation based, especially for hardware, you lose a lot in security because you just don't get the incentives in the right way.
Yeah.
So anyways.
Yeah, testing out in the market, it's like, are people going to buy this? Like, are they going to part with their hard-earned money or not?
That's right. I mean, the first version, the buttons were capacitive, right? And we tested, worked in North America, worked in Asia, but then in Europe, the power has more interference. So like a lot of people were having issues with the first one in Europe. Like the touch sucked, and we spent some time trying to fix it. Eventually, we just move on to clicky buttons, right? So anyway, it's just like this experience, right, of like learning through more people using. So the bigger your market, the more feedback loop you have for like people trying to break things, people trying to purposely break things. And you sort of can improve, and we all gain from that.
We do. Yeah. And so there's some cool things too coming. It looked like with the cold card, some teasers you've been throwing on Twitter, NFC, for instance.
It's so for a long time we wanted to put a camera on a hardware wallet, but then it's like it's expensive. I don't like the security trade-offs of the complexity. I don't think it's necessary. People shouldn't be walking around with a hardware wallet. It's like if you want a phone wallet, use a phone wallet. You already have a QR scanner on a phone, right? Hardware wallets are for money, not for spending money. But there are some realities to the market, right? Like a lot of people in the world will not have a computer anymore. They have a tablet, they have a phone, they don't have a computer. And without a computer, you don't have good USB support, you don't have like good microSD support sometimes. So we wanted to enable all the people that don't have computers to have a more pleasant experience, right? Because cold card with a phone is okay, it's not great. So we wanted to still remain fairly affordable, like fairly sort of constrained in how the security works, not add all that complexity. And by the way, even the phone wallets, the hardware wallets that do have cameras, people do, I've tried them, and like people do text me saying, they suck. Like the QR is not great, and then you have QR is very low bandwidth. So it was not the kind of trade-off I wanted to make. So we started sort of thinking, do we use a light sensor and do some light interface? Do we do some audio interface? Like what do we do, right? And we're like, duh. Like all phones have NFC, right? NFC 5 is reasonably fast, for our purposes. And we can enable all this other stuff, but hey, we don't like radios on hardware wallets. So the compromise is we put a little trace that it can scrape the cold card so that you can permanently. So if this cold card is for cold storage, NFC comes disabled. It will come disabled by factory. You can have to go in a menu and turn it on.
Mm-hmm.
But if you're gonna use this for cold storage and real money, personally, I would just turn off the NFC permanently. You go and you scrape a PCB there on the corner, and it's done. Like it's like literally you cannot power the chip, right?
Yeah.
So you're completely off radio. So that was like, okay, great. So we have a way of canceling that trade-off, right? But we can still offer that feature to people without increasing much the price. But yeah, so we did that, and the NFC it really is nice to use. Like you put the cold card on top or below the phone, and it just does its thing. You can store deposit address on the NFC chip. You can store the XPub on the NFC chip. You can pick what you want to do with it. You can go as little or as far as you want to go with it. You're going to be able to have your BIP85 deterministic seed there if you want to load onto a phone and you don't want to use QR. So it opens up a huge thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And terminals, in the wild, they're going to eventually start having Bitcoin sort of solutions on them. Maybe use them there, maybe not. Do whatever you want with it. So that's like something we're pretty excited about because it does enable a lot.
Is that BIP85? Is that the root of your Twitter handle, your new Twitter name?
Oh no, so no, the Twitter name is it's more related to Bitcoin's inevitability. Everything, because it's public private key cryptography, everything is deterministic, including Bitcoin's success.
I love it. Well, maybe too then, excited about those forthcoming features. I noticed on your careers page at Coinkite, you're looking for a React Native developer. Anything in like a mobile app coming soon?
Well, I mean, I wouldn't necessarily say like we want to build an app for ourselves. I don't want to deal with that, but we want to help. Like we want to have internal capacity to help other projects. So, maybe we're building NFC SDKs for wallet devs. Maybe we're helping them integrate stuff. Maybe, maybe we make some fun widgets like watch faces or whatever, right? But you'd be nice to have the competency in house, just to do those things. No Coinkite app, ideally.
Okay. I guess maybe last but not least, and right up your alley, is the original block clock and the block clock mini, just over your left shoulder there.
That's right.
Did that stem from just your desire to want an art piece for Bitcoin?
Yeah, so the block, we always wanted to make a display device for Bitcoin, right? But we couldn't really justify the time or like, it's just the idea wasn't quite there. And then we started thinking, okay, it's going to be 10 years of Bitcoin. It's when the block clock OG came out. We need to make something to commemorate 10 years, right? Like it's just too much of an important date. And we started messing around with like more mechanical sort of like display solutions, and then we said like fuck you to like budgets, and we're like, okay, well, let's just make something really fucking awesome. It doesn't matter how much it's gonna cost, and we made it. We sold some. It's not exactly like a huge sort of like flying off the shelves kind of product. So sort of like, we serialize them, we park the project. It's kind of fun, and people have something that it's very unlikely we will make more in scale. We're just gonna sort of like, because we sold it all, everything we had, and
wow,
we're like, let's not make another batch. Maybe in the future we'll make some custom ones, but no, that was it. But a lot of people really wanted block clock, right? Like, and it was completely like unattainable financially for most people. It was like $4,000 or $5,000. I can't remember anymore. So we made the block clock mini, which was like, okay, like let's let's not make a cheap thing. Let's make something that most people can afford, and it sort of like has triple gold on the PCB, which costs a fortune. It does have some of the stuff that makes it look awesome, but still like sort of not a computer screen. I don't want another computer screen on my life, right? Like, if I want to see the charts on the computer, like that's not the goal. The goal is like, let's just show some numbers, some hacks, something that's pleasant.
Yeah.
In a more lower sort of time preference, it's maximum 5 minutes increments, like in terms of the smallest increment. So we made that one. Maybe we'll make another one even cheaper that's like smaller or something in the future. But for now, that's the one, and people seem to like it.
It's a pretty piece because it looks like a clock, but it displays the time, right, and a bunch of other things.
Right. I mean, and then it couldn't ask for more, right? I mean, like the Moscow time meme was just so good. Oh my God, that was just absolutely brilliant. I don't know. It's just I love how Bitcoin is like pure meme, right? Like it's just so good that like the lowest form of bandwidth information, which is a meme, right? Like truly works out, and it's just like it's such an honor to have like your product be part of a meme like that. It's pretty cool.
That is cool. Well, NVK, we've talked a lot about Bitcoin. You've outed yourself as a sauna maximalist as well.
I am a fan of the sauna for many years. I highly recommend people get into it. It's like how Bitcoin is a cheat code to life. Sauna is another cheat code to life. Like it's like very, very low effort, extremely high reward in many senses. I am a fan. Do you sauna?
I do every now and then, but not like you. So I used to do more steam room. So okay. Sell me on sauna over steam.
I mean, steam is fiat sauna. So yeah, like you have to do the real deal. So the Finnish really have the best stoves, but the Russians have the best cycles. You really need a place that is fucking hot, right? Like, you want 80 Celsius, like 90 Celsius, right? At the top of the room, right? Where the thermometer for the stove is.
Yeah.
So, and you could almost say that like every foot it drops almost 10 degrees Celsius, right? Like it's like so when I say 90 degrees, it doesn't mean like it's 90 degrees on you, right?
Yeah.
But that's what the dial would show in a normal sauna that like has the right temperature. So then like you wear the wool hat, right? This is the first mistake that North Americans do. It's like you go into a sauna with your bare head, and your bare head cannot handle the temperature. So it's bad for your head. It cooks up your brain, and it heats you up too fast. So you put the wool hat on. You go in dry, so that the heat exchange between your skin and the air is a lot slower. So then you have your little stove there, and you throw water on it with a ladle. If you want to put some oils in, that's fine too. But like you make it steamy. So the Finnish style is a lot drier, at least as far as I understand. But the Russians make the same style stove-ish, right? The rock stove. They make it very wet inside. Just put a lot more water. So you want the humidity, it opens your nostrils, right? And you produce a lot of nitrox in your airways, and it mixes in with what you breathe in. It dilates all your capillaries, right? So because your body is trying to cool off your skin, so it dilates everything. That means is that it increases your blood pressure. So your heart, sorry, it lowers your blood pressure, so it increases your heart rate, right? So your heart really pumps it out. So now you're having like a workout, right, for free. And when you have temperature extremes of your body produces a bunch of good stuff. Prevent, for example, cell mutation. There's a bunch of compounds that are produced. I can't remember now a lot of that science. There's some good books out there on this stuff. And so you're producing all these things that normally you would get only if you ran a marathon, right? I'm a lazy guy, exercise-wise. So like you're getting all this stuff going, right? And your breathing system is sort of getting a workout as well, right? You're breathing all this hot stuff. And then you cold plunge, right? You increase testosterone that way. Close your porises when you do the cold plunge. And then what that means, it traps the heat. So now you sit with a towel there, you relax. Now you get like deep relaxation. Kind of like similar to like when you do a lot of exercise but without hurting yourself. You get a little bit of that sort of like,
Mm-hmm.
You sit there, you have all your muscles relaxed. And then once you start feeling cold again, then you go in for another round, but you go in dry. And then you sort of repeat the cycle. And you never stay more than 15 minutes in the super hot sauna, right? No wonder all the sauna clocks and hourglasses you can buy from Eastern Europe are always max 15 minutes on the scale, right?
Huh.
You don't want to like hurt yourself in there.
Yeah.
I find that like people go to saunas and steam rooms here in North America, stay like an hour inside. It's like, no, dude, it's not what you're trying to achieve here. You're just cooking yourself. You're killing brain cells that way. Anyway, so yeah, it's a huge pleasure to do sauna. I highly recommend people get a setup in their house.
Nice. Okay, last thing here. Sats card.
Oh, there is no information about such device.
Okay. Just on the Twitter handle. Just go follow the Twitter handle.
I don't even know who owns that Twitter account.
Okay. That's fair. Well, awesome. What's that? Oh, man, I thought I was going to get something. Well, anyway, NVK, it's been a real pleasure today. I think we already talked about your Twitter handle, but as far as those who might be watching who've lived under a rock, who don't know where to find you, can you plug away where they find you and your company?
Yeah, so I'm a little bit too much on Twitter at NVK. You can find at COLDCARD wallet, at Coinkite, at OPENDIME. We have a lot of stuff through there. We have like the Telegram user group, and you can find our stuff and go from there.
Awesome. Well, once again, great pleasure having you on the show.
Thanks for having me. It's fun to talk about sauna.
Yeah, that's right. Oh man, what a wide-ranging interview there with NVK. From the origins of Coinkite, and even for him, the origins of getting into technology and Bitcoin. It makes so much sense that he has an art background, because the design aesthetic of Coinkite and the interfaces and the products, the hardware itself, is artistic. I mean, there's just no better way to put it. The design is really on point, and it has a really great brand overall. And so for him to bring that along with Doc Hex's technological just chops. But I mean, come on now, like everything NVK is doing, like he is self-taught. Are you kidding me? If you scan one of his first I think it's his pin tweet, is all about how he broadcasted a Bitcoin transaction via ham radio. So obviously he's been a hobbyist on the technology side, but such a cool background and story. And if you are not using a Coinkite device or interface of some sort, get on that stat. Very affordable still, secure, I think the standard in the market, and clearly a people person too. And then last but not least, make sure you get in that sauna. In any case, thanks so much again for tuning in to another episode. If you would please, every like, subscribe, that sort of thing on YouTube, and by the time you check this out, it might be on Apple or Google Play or Spotify as well. Every like, subscribe, comment, hopefully positive, is going to help get the show out to more and more people. So once again, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Changing the Tide.